Welcome to the Front Page. I'm Peter Gleeson, and tonight we're going to take a look at the front pages across the nation's newspapers, as we do every night at this time, and helping me analyse the big stories is my panel. Joining me here in our Brisbane studio is Queensland Liberal National MP David Crisafulli, and of course in Adelaide we have columnist Caleb Bond from The Advertiser. Now, tomorrow's front pages are dominated by the impact of the coronavirus. There's plenty going on in that space, and we will get to those front pages very shortly. But let's get the latest on exactly what's happening as Australians are being warned against travelling to parts of Italy as the coronavirus continues to spread across the globe. Preparations are underway for an outbreak within Australia as the Treasurer is forced to count the cost to the economy.
Fears rise as the coronavirus continues to go global.
Our concern now is the number of countries outside of China, making it more likely that we will have further outbreaks in Australia.
But the Chief Medical Officer says there's no need to be alarmed.
We are still contained in Australia. We have no community transmission of this virus in Australia.
The Morrison government is preparing for a global pandemic to be declared, but school closures and hospital restrictions will only be considered if there's a big outbreak here.
This is a flexible plan. It depends on the circumstances at the time.
Preparations also underway to cancel big public events like the AFL.
The possibility of events is always there, but that is a last resort.
One biosecurity expert warns in the worst case scenario, 50% of Australians could catch the virus. 1.8 million hospital beds would be needed, as well as 650,000 intensive care places. Professor Raina McIntyre from the University of New South Wales warning 3% of infected Australians could die. That's approximately 300,000 people.
We don't know what scenarios will eventuate, but our plan has to be such that we are ready for whatever happens.
The spread of the virus into parts of Europe has triggered the travel advice to be raised for northern Italy.
That is exercise a high degree of caution for the provinces of Lombardy and Veneto.
While the human toll remains the priority, the Treasurer is counting the cost to the economy, downplaying expectations he himself raised about the prospect of a budget surplus.
In terms of the exact number, Treasury is still doing that work, and obviously the virus continues to evolve.
The government's own China travel ban has had an impact, particularly on the lucrative university sector, and it appears for now it will remain.
But that's a decision for the government to make. The medical advice would be that we should be fairly cautious.
Trudy McIntosh, Sky News, Canberra.
All right, let's bring our panel in now. David Crisafulli, if we go straight to the front of the Australian headline, virus fires, 1.5 million visitors lost. Up to 1.5 million international visitors will be lost to Australia due to the coronavirus and bushfire crisis, in a crippling blow to tourism as the disease now threatening the Tokyo Olympics forces Scott Morrison to prepare for last resort closures of schools and cancellations of football matches. Now, you're the opposition tourism spokesman, so the alternative tourism minister here in Queensland. You've seen up close and personal the impact of this particular crisis. It doesn't look like it's getting any better right now, David.
No, it's massive. It's had a massive impact. And I know, first and foremost, whenever you talk about it, you have to acknowledge it is first and foremost a health issue. People are losing their lives, and you've got to be mindful and respectful of that. But we also work in a global world, and we have to face up to reality, and the reality is it's costing us dearly. It's costing people jobs, it's costing opportunities. And the federal government today announced a very big marketing package. That is so welcome. But it's difficult to sell anything at a time when people are overly cautious, and the ramifications for tourism are going to be massive. And sadly, Gleeso, they're going to be massive for a long, long time, I fear.
Caleb, let's have a look. We'll sort of just rotate some of these front pages, because this is the biggest story, not only in Australia right now, it's the biggest story in the world right now. And of course, we're seeing a very significant impact when you look at tourism, when you look at education, when you look at export. It's having an impact. Virus Stadium Plan is the headline on the front of the Sydney Morning Herald. Sports venues could be used for quarantine, sporting stadiums converted into quarantine camps, police guarding medical stockpiles, and schools temporarily shut down are some of the actions authorities are prepared to take if Australia succumbs to a major coronavirus outbreak. It's pretty challenging stuff, Caleb.
Well, it's like something out of a movie, isn't it? I mean, if you'd told us 2 months ago that this is what we would be facing right now, I think most people would have laughed at you because it just seems so out of the ordinary, so incredible. But here we are, and I mean, I know we've been saying this every single week. I've been on this show for the last month. We've been saying, my goodness, it's getting worse and worse as every week passes. And here we are saying the same thing this week. The trouble is, though, that because this is a global disease, and you really cannot contain its spread, there's nothing you can do about it. You know, the fact that it is affecting the tourism industry, the fact that it is affecting the stock market, it is economically crippling many parts of Australia and the rest of the world, it is hospitalising many people and killing many people, is not something that we can actually do all that much about. We can finesse around the edges and try to keep people away and maintain a travel ban to China, which is absolutely right. But other than that, there's not a lot we can do. So it's kind of like strapping yourself in and hoping for the best. And obviously what we heard before about 50% of Australians contracting coronavirus is absolutely the worst case scenario and is very unlikely. But these are very real things. These are things that we have to consider and cope with like we've never had to cope with any disease of this sort before. So we're learning on the run, we're making policy up on the run, and the effect of this disease at the moment, even though we can see what it's doing right now, is still untold. I mean, if we know now that it's having this effect on our tourism industry and the economy and whatever, I mean, what's it going to be like in another 2 months? It's just something that basically we have to sit here and live with.
If we head to the front of the Telegraph, we get another perspective. Virus death plans, end of life warning for aged care residents. Nursing home residents and their families will be encouraged to discuss their end of life plans amid growing fears of a coronavirus outbreak that would result in rationing of intensive care beds. David, if we head to the front of the Cairns Post, this is very much within your wheelhouse, and of course I refer to the headline, "Millions for FNQ Tourism, Cairns star attraction in federal relief campaign." Finally, Scott Morrison is listening, and he's decided to whack some serious dough into some of these really strife-torn areas of North Queensland. Cairns will be a major recipient of a new $40 million campaign to reignite international tourism as the federal government opens up bushfire tourism recovery funds to destinations peering over a coronavirus travel cliff.
Yeah, this is a massive, massive injection, and boy, oh boy, Peter, is it needed right now. The Cairns economy has done it tough well before coronavirus. Coronavirus has been the icing on the cake of what has been a region that's done it really tough. It's a beautiful region. They've got a great story to sell, and this will help sell that story. The quantum for Cairns is more than what the state put on the table for the entire state just a couple of weeks ago. So this will have an impact. You mentioned about the nursing homes. Well, we have to look at all of those options. You have to look at options, everything from police detaining people if they have the virus and want to leave. You have to look at contingencies for your nursing homes, because if you get it wrong, the penalty is so severe when it comes to your economic and social impacts. And my concern is that we have nations that I think have probably been a little tardy. We have nations that may not be telling the full story about the impact of coronavirus on them. And we heard about the research for a cure early on in the piece. Well, that's gone quiet. I really hope that that comes to the fore, because I think this sleeping giant could be a lot worse than what we think in the weeks to come. And
Caleb, we haven't even spoken about the impact that the coronavirus has had on stock exchanges around the world in the last 48 hours. Let's go to the front of the Financial Review. This is how it's hitting home when it comes to investors. Market losses at $129 billion. Yeah. More falls expected. Pandemic fears belt travel stocks. Listed travel and tourism businesses face deeper losses as the global travel industry reels from the escalating coronavirus crisis, which puts Australian shares close to erasing all of their gains this year. Now, the last time we saw these type of losses on the stock market was in 2015, Caleb. It's really starting to bite now.
It sure is, and this is a very hot topic because it not only involves people who choose to buy shares personally, it involves everyone, because everyone, who at least who has a job anyway, has superannuation. And so this is hitting all of us. We've talked about restaurants closing down, we've talked about tourism, but this hits every single Australian. And this is how wide the effect of coronavirus is. It's not just a disease that is killing people in China. It is a disease that is literally strangling the whole world. But once again, there's not a great deal we can do about it, because for as long as this disease is hanging around and is a threat to people, there will be travel bans, there will be people who don't want to go on holiday around the world, there will be people who don't want to go to restaurants, and it will continue to affect the stock market. I mean, the effects are just completely untold, and I suspect will get worse. And as we already know, we've seen that the economic modelling shows that the impact of this will be worse than the bushfires, and that was before any of this even began. So I suspect we've got a very hard year ahead of us when it comes to the Australian economy and the world economy.